Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us this evening. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Catherine Pursuti, and I'm the Executive Director of Student Financial Aid here at the University of Hartford. And I'm joined by a few of my colleagues this evening, one of which I'll give an opportunity to introduce herself now.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Kitchens, Assistant Vice President of Student Success. I'm excited to meet with you all tonight and talk a little bit about the financial aid and billing process.
Thank you, Katie. And I do have a couple of members of the financial aid team, Patricia Billings and Nicole Masai, that'll be working behind the scenes, helping us with the Q&A section once we get there. One of the big questions that we've gotten ahead of this presentation and that we often get from families is whether or not we're going to be recording the presentation this evening. And the answer to that is yes, we will be recording the presentation. So don't feel like you have to frantically be taking notes. We want you to just kind of listen to what we're talking about, ask any questions that you may have, and give you an opportunity to ask those questions at the end of the presentation. So we do ask that you hold the questions until the end of the presentation. You will notice at the bottom of your screen that you have two functions. You have a chat function and you have a Q&A function. When we get to the Q&A section of our presentation, which will be at the end, we do ask that you use the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature. It just keeps everything in one spot and makes it easy for all of us who are on the back end answering those questions for you all. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing this evening. We're going to go over just some general resources that we think that you'll find helpful. Then we'll take you all the way through the financial aid process and we'll take you through the billing process. And we're going to structure it in such a way that some of the information we're going to be going over is going to be a little bit repetitive because it's pieces that you've already done, but some of it is what's coming and what you should be thinking about now as we continue through the rest of the summer, beginning or getting closer to the fall semester.
So first things first, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of the Student Self-Service Center. This is a really important online hub that your students should already be accessing. So if they haven't accessed this yet or aren't sure how to do that, they did receive instructions in their email when they first deposited to the university. This is an important hub where they can register for classes, although we are taking care of that for them in this first semester, but that's where they'll go in the future. But it's also where they can view and pay their bill, which is the point of our conversation today. So it's a really important tool for them to be able to access and use, and you should be involved in that as well. Along those lines, we definitely want to make sure that everyone's aware of what we call FERPA, but the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So our students, now that they're reaching the college level, actually own their education record outright. So once they matriculate here at the University of Hartford, the education record fully belongs to them, and we are only allowed to share information about their education, including anything related to billing and financial aid, but also anything related to academics or their classes, their progress, etc., with people that they tell us we can share it with. So they actually have to designate you or some other member of their family, close friends, that they want us to be able to speak with about their education record. So this is in effect the entire time the student's enrolled, and they can give FERPA access, but they can also take it away. So that's something you really want to have an open conversation with your student about. We do have a process where students can give access to an online portal that you actually, as the family, can access if they've given you that access. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about kind of what that portal looks like so that you can just get a sense of what to expect if your student hasn't done this already. This is something we really want them to take care of over the summer so that we're able to just immediately begin corresponding with you if you have any questions about the process or as they get into college. So what your student will notice when they're on their My UHeart menu is something called Web Proxy /FERPA. And it's a card that looks just like what you're seeing on your screen. And there's two steps that they have to complete in order to give us the ability to communicate with you and to give you access to have the online portal. So the first thing is they have to accept the terms of FERPA, which essentially just lets them know that, what this means is that we can share information with you and that the access that they give is going to give you some login abilities of your own. And then in step 2 is where they actually go to give the access. So this is part of what the student will fill out. And the reason I put this up here, even though the student's going to be taking care of this, is that I want to show really the different checkboxes. So the student is able to give access to different topics in different ways. So all of the things that are checked here would be an example of a student who's given full access to the person that they're putting on their FERPA. So that means that you can log in and see certain screens, such as the account summary, or grade information or tax information. Those are all pages that you could log in and see. This also would give us the ability to talk to you about the student's academics, about the student's billing and financial aid information. Residential life and student conduct work a little bit differently, so I just want to draw your attention to those quickly. There isn't an online portal that this would give you access to actually view or see anything, but this is where if you give us a call and you have questions about residential living or anything related to student conduct, the student checking these boxes allows us to communicate with you about that. So some of these just work a little differently than others, and that's why I wanted to make sure we went over it for you. So if a student does put you in here, then what you'll see is the next slide, which is this email. And actually you'll get a series of emails because we do send like the link to log in a separate email from where we send the password just for security purposes. So you'll actually get a couple emails, but they mostly look like this in a similar format. And you'll have a link and then you'll have your password to be able to log in. So this verifies your email that they've entered. So if you're working with your student on doing this, I really recommend sitting down and doing it together. So that you can make sure that they are putting in the email address that you want them to put in. So that like the place that you're actually going to go and look when you want to receive that information. All right, one more quick note, and if you've been corresponding with us throughout the year or visited the university at any prior time, then I'm sure you've heard about the Center for Student Success, but I highlight it here because one of the many things that we work with students on in the Center for Student Success is billing and really just financial and administrative questions. So if you aren't sure where to go, it is always a safe bet to start with the CSS, and really they're going to help to connect you to another department if necessary, or they're honestly often able to answer the questions themselves. So please feel free, if you didn't already give us a call today, I know many folks did, please feel free to give the CSS a call with any questions that you have related to advising, first year scheduling, registration, or anything related to billing and payments as well.
Thank you, Katie. I'd like to now introduce you to the Office of Student Financial Aid here at the University of Hartford. I think it's likely we've spent some time talking with you and your family over the course of the admission cycle when you were making your final decision to attend the University of Hartford. You've actually also probably already visited our building. So we share our building with the Office of Undergraduate Admission. It's called the Bates House. It is the only White House with red shutters on campus, so you can't miss us. We are generally open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We welcome students to just walk into our office to sit down to meet with one of our financial aid team members to ask any questions that they may have. We are closing at 2 p.m. on Fridays in the summer, so just keep that in mind. That's true across the university. We can be reached by email, by phone. We have a live chat feature on our website, and so we'd like to connect with you in any way that feels best for your family. We're also available for virtual appointments, so we're happy to connect with you in any of those ways. Each student who attends the University of Hartford is assigned a financial aid counselor or financial aid staff member to work with them throughout their 4 years here at the university. It is broken down by school or college in which they're attending or their major here at the University of Hartford. So you can see that information listed on the screen now. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I do have Nicole and Trisha on the presentation this evening, and you'll see that they are assigned a certain school or college here. I do want to note that any one of our financial aid team members can help any student. So if a student is to walk into Bates House and wants to sit down to meet with somebody, but let's say Amber is unavailable at the time, that's no problem. All of our staff is cross-trained to assist students. We also work really closely with our Center for Student Success on campus to help support students academically. So if a student is struggling on the academic side, which may be impacting their financial aid, we work really closely and build a strong relationship with our Center for Student Success. And again, we want to work with you and we want to speak to you about your specific financial situation that we can best help guide your family. So what is financial aid? When we're talking about financial aid, we're really talking about an umbrella term. And that umbrella term encompasses grants, scholarships, so that's that free money that everybody wants, loan opportunities, both for students and for parents, And then lastly, employment opportunities. So an opportunity to work on campus through the federal work study program or any other type of part-time employment for students to help pay for their educational expenses. The Office of Student Financial Aid at the University of Hartford works with families on all of these things. And most of our students are using a combination of all four of these. So grants and scholarships, that free money, loans, and employment opportunities. And our staff is trained to work with families to help them navigate all of these processes. The financial aid process at the University of Hartford really begins at the time of a student's admission to the university. So upon their admission to the university, they would have received a congratulatory letter from the Office of Undergraduate Admission, and included in that letter was likely some type of academic or talent award. This is based on those admission requirements, so things like SAT scores, a GPA from high school, a class rank from your high school, that sort of thing. If a student isn't pursuing the arts or the Hart School, it may have been based on a portfolio or based on an audition. Those are for many of our talent awards. Generally speaking, academic and talent awards are renewed every year for 4 years of undergraduate coursework here at the university. And they typically require some type of GPA criteria. In some cases, that is meeting minimum academic standards across the university. In other cases, it's a requirement for a 3.0 or a 3.25 GPA. So that can vary based on the type of award that it is. If the student's unsure what the renewability criteria is for their particular award, they can log into their self-service account, which Katie mentioned briefly earlier, and they can find their award under the financial aid tab, and right there it will tell them what the renewability criteria is. They can also reach out to the Office of Student Financial Aid or the Center for Student Success, and we can help them understand that as well. I do want to mention that we do have some accelerated programs here at the university. And some of those programs mean that the student is only in undergraduate coursework for 3 years or maybe 3.5 years. During that time, they would renew their academic or talent award. But once they move into the graduate portion of the program, the structure of both billing and financial aid changes, and therefore the academic and talent award would likely not be available, but could be replaced with some other type of graduate academic award or scholarship. So just keep that in mind as a student continues to progress towards their degree, and they can certainly reach out to their financial aid counselor to help talk them through that as well. So that's kind of phase 1 of the financial aid process. Phase 2 of the financial aid process is when a student applies for need-based financial aid. So need-based financial aid is applied for through the FAFSA form, so the free application for federal student aid. And at this point in time, the FAFSA form is available for students for the fall of 2024. So if you haven't completed a FAFSA, but you think you'd like to apply for need-based aid, we certainly encourage you to do that. It is definitely not too late for the fall of 2024. But this is the only application that's required in order to request need-based financial aid funding. The University of Hartford participates in institutional, federal, and state funding programs. So every student who completes a FAFSA form will automatically be reviewed for all 3 of these. And so they may receive a combination of institutional, federal, and state need-based aid programs. Need-based financial aid is generally renewed from year to year as well. As long as the information on the FAFSA stays relatively the same, then the need-based financial aid award from year to year will also stay relatively the same. The key there, though, is that the FAFSA does need to be renewed every year by April 1st. So every returning student does need to complete the FAFSA every year by our April 1st deadline. Don't worry, we send lots of reminders to students. We make sure that it gets out there on campus so that students remember to get this taken care of. And hopefully in future years, the FAFSA will be much easier and much quicker process and a more painless process for many of our families. One of the need-based aid programs that the University of Hartford participates in is an employment program called the Federal Work Study Program. And we get lots of questions about this, so I'd like to talk about it in this presentation specifically. The Federal Work Study Program is an opportunity for students to work on campus through the Federal Work Study award that they receive as part of their full financial aid award package. When they work on campus, they earn an hourly rate, and that hourly rate is paid to them through a biweekly paycheck. So what does that mean? That means students will actually not see federal work study listed as a transaction on their bill. And we'll talk about what pending transactions look like on the bill in just a few minutes. But they won't see it listed there because they have to work on campus and earn those funds as they work. And again, This is a need-based aid program. So not all students are eligible for the program. They do have to have a certain demonstrated financial need. And unfortunately, we don't have enough funding for all of the eligible students here at the university. And so we do have a wait list for those funds. So if the student looks at their financial aid award, doesn't see federal work study, but thinks that that might be something that they'd be interested in order to work on campus and earn some funds, then certainly we ask them to reach out to our office and we're happy to put them on a wait list. Students not eligible for federal work study, they can still work on campus. So there are a number of different departments on campus that hire part-time student workers outside of the federal work study program. So similarly, they would earn a biweekly paycheck by working hours on campus. Certainly, those jobs are a bit more limited, but certainly an opportunity for students as well. I do want to mention that we tentatively have scheduled for September 5th an on-campus job fair where we will have both federal work study jobs and other on-campus employment opportunities for students to come and apply for if they're interested in working on campus for the fall semester. So again, just tentatively write that down. We certainly will let students know when the time comes. The Federal Direct Loan Program is another opportunity that students might see listed on their full financial aid award letter that they receive from the University of Hartford. And under the Federal Direct Loan Program, there are two different loans that I'd like to walk students through because they often have questions about this. So the Federal Direct Loan Program is a loan program that is offered to students directly. So the student doesn't need a cosigner, doesn't need to go through any type of credit check. It is strictly based on the results of the FAFSA. The student is the loan borrower, and the student has the obligation for repayment on this loan program. Some students will see listed on their award letter a subsidized loan. The subsidized loan means that while the student is in school, they will not have interest accruing on that loan. So the interest is paid by the government. You'll see the interest rate listed on the screen as well at a 6.53% interest rate for this upcoming academic year. Students do not need to be making payments on that loan. So interest will not accrue and payments are not required until 6 months after graduation. The unsubsidized loan will have interest while the student is in school. So it will be accruing interest at that same interest rate. However, students are not required to make payments on that loan either. Now, that being said, a common question we get from families is, well, if we want to make payments, can we? And the answer to that is yes. And we always suggest making payments to the unsubsidized portion of any loan first, obviously because it's going to be accruing interest while the student is in school. Every student who is interested in borrowing through the Federal Direct Loan Program does need to complete a loan agreement or a master promissory note and an entrance counseling. Both of those are completed online at studentaid.gov. And so we would ask the student to make sure that they've done that at this point in time and make sure that they get that done by the end of July as well. Information about completing both of the entrance counseling and the loan agreement is in the student's self-service account. So they can log into self-service and look under the financial aid tab and they would see a listing of this requirement. And if they need any assistance with that, we certainly welcome them to reach out to us. When students receive their initial bill from the University of Hartford, they're going to see their financial aid listed as a pending transaction. This is because we are not allowed, based on U.S. Department of Education requirements, to apply financial aid to a student's account until 10 days prior to the start of each semester. But we know that the financial aid is helping to cover a portion of whatever a student is billed. And Katie will show an example of this in just a few minutes. But all financial aid is going to be listed as a pending transaction until that 10-day point. That being said, there are some things that can block a student's aid from going from a pending transaction to an actual transaction, even at that 10-day point. And that is that we're missing some type of financial aid requirement. So as I mentioned previously, students who are borrowing on the subsidized or unsubsidized loan must complete both the entrance counseling and the master promissory note in order for the loan to go from pending to an actual transaction. So we ask that they do that by the end of July. Sometimes we request additional documentation, such as a copy of a passport or maybe some tax documentation. Students would have been contacted about that. So they should check their email. We would have contacted them if that was something that needed to be completed, and they can see that in the self-service account as well. The 10-day point is August 19th of 2024 at this point in time. And so if after August 19th, you still see aid as pending, then it is an indicator to you that something may be incorrect. And so you would want the student to log in, or the student should log in their self-service account to check in with that, or contact our office for more information. I've already gone through some of these financial aid requirements, but just to kind of list a few other things that need to be done by the end of July. Submitting verification documents. So if the student was contacted, letting them know they were selected for verification and need to supply tax information, they should do that by the end of July. They must accept their financial aid award. And so in order to accept their financial aid award, they log into their self-service account, they go to the financial aid tab, and then they'll see a tab labeled accept award offer. We have emailed this information to students as well, and they have step-by-step directions in their University of Hartford email account. Making sure that master promissory note and entrance counseling is done as well. And all of this can be viewed in the self-service account.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So everything that Catherine just talked about, as she mentioned, has already taken place at this point in the cycle, but there are some things that can still happen if you have not actually completed some of those steps yet. But as of today, we've entered into a new phase of the process, which is actually receiving that bill and going into the tuition and fees. So that's what I want to get into now, and then we'll sort of explain how all of that ties together. We know this is a lot of information, so again, please, feel free to rewatch this or ask us questions when we get to the end of the presentation. We're more than happy to help walk you all through this. So tuition and fees, of course, they're located on hartford.edu, but now that bills have actually been released for the fall semester, you should be able to access this via your student. Bills did go out today. If you are already set up as an authorized payer on the account, which we'll get into a little bit later in case some of you haven't done that yet, then you would have received a notification about this as well. So you can actually now see what the full-time tuition charges are, and it's sort of official in your student's record. So on that bill, you are going to see the charge for full-time tuition. If your student's registered for anything between 12 and 18 credits, they're going to see that same full-time tuition charge. So below 12 credits, they get into part-time, which we're not looking to do for our incoming students. And then above 18 credits, there are additional charges, again, but we don't recommend that for our incoming students. Then you're also, in addition to the tuition, going to see some different fees. So all students have to pay that registration fee, a technology fee, and a student support services fee, which gives them access to all of the great services on campus. Then, depending on the school of enrollment, you may see an additional fee for specifically Hillier or Hart students due to the additional materials and needs associated with those colleges. And then you may see some course-specific fees. They're often listed as lab fees, which is a little bit of a misnomer, so I don't love it, but they're listed as lab fees even if it's not associated with a lab course. So it may be associated with any course that just has some additional materials. They're generally pretty small additional charges, but you will see those listed as well on the bill. If your student's going to be living on campus, then you will also see a charge based on their room assignment. So you will see a housing charge and a meal charge, or a room and board is what we kind of colloquially refer to that as. So students, any students who's living on campus is required to have that meal plan. They can upgrade or downgrade their meal plan. Often that's taking place over the summer, but within the first 2 weeks of the semester as well, they're able to upgrade or downgrade. They can really upgrade at any time, but they can only downgrade within those first 2 weeks. So it's important that they're paying attention to their usage over those first 2 weeks in case they did feel like they needed to increase that meal plan as well. And then you would just see that change reflected in their student account in their Transact Center right away, or on the next billing cycle, you would actually see that reflected in the bill if there were changes to that. So again, all of our residential students are required to have that meal plan, but there are also meal plans available to commuter students. They're a little bit different because they're intended to meet the needs of that specific population, but they are not required. So we bill exclusively electronically, with the caveat that in the first semester, we will be sending a bill home. So that very first bill, so the one that just got released today, in addition to receiving that virtually, you will also have that mailed home. So if you're sitting here thinking, like, my student didn't mention anything, I had no idea bills went out today, oh my gosh, what's going on? Don't worry, there's still time. It was just today, and it is a good time for you to check in with your student to make sure that you're set up up with the proper permissions so that you do get those notifications as well. They would have received something to their hartford.edu email address prompting them to log in to their student self-service center to be able to view that bill in there. So it would be a great idea after this presentation or tomorrow to sit down together and take a look at that. In addition, in the next week or so, you should also be receiving that bill via mail. So you'll have a physical paper copy just for this first cycle as well. Again, just to make sure that communication is really open and everyone has everything that they need while we're still getting everything set up. So electronic billing is obviously very convenient, and it's probably what you're used to with everything else that you, view and pay bills for. But it does, require a little bit of an explanation in terms of how to get you set up. The student is automatically set up because it's considered to be their account. But what they can then do is set you up as an authorized payer. And that gives you full access to the same portal as well to be able to view the bill, make payments, set up payment plans, etc. So it's a little bit different than web proxy, which just allows you to log in and view things that are related to the student's record. Being an authorized payer in the payment system gives you the ability to log in and actually make payments yourself and sort of do things within that specific portal. So it is a little bit different. So I like to mention that because it is possible for a student to set you up as a FERPA contact and give you access to like billing information that way, but not to make you an authorized payer. And it wouldn't probably quite give you everything that you're thinking of. So it is important that they do both so that we're able to not only communicate with you about like answering your billing related questions, but that you're also able to log in and see things for yourself as well in that system. Something I like to always make sure that I draw everyone's attention to is that we also have the ability for, it's called guest payer, so I should say guests to make payments, but really what that means is if anybody else wants to be contributing to the student's educational costs as either a one-time thing or even a regular thing, they can use this link that you see here on the very bottom of the screen. And all that gives them access to, it's not the ability to log into the account, it's not the ability to see any information that's in the account. It's really just, they just need to have that link and then the student's ID number and their last name. And it's just going to give them a box where they can enter an amount and they can enter their payment information and they can contribute any dollar amount towards the student's costs. So that just goes directly to the account. But again, it doesn't give them access to view things. So this isn't what you probably are looking for as the student's parent or family member who's going to be assisting with making payments on a regular basis. But it is a useful link to share if you have any other friends, family, relatives who are interested in contributing, maybe on a less regular basis and don't need that same level of access. So important things to note here are the due dates and that we bill actually separately for the fall semester and the spring semester. So the bill that went out today is a fall semester bill only. So that is why you will only see half of that expected first year cost of attendance, as well as half of the financial aid that you would be seeing as pending transactions, just going for the fall semester. The fall bill is due by July 30th. And then we will bill separately in mid-November for the spring semester, which will again then include the other half of the financial aid awards and then the rest of the year's tuition. That's due by December. And the dates will be released obviously in that bill. It's always, by mid-November and then due mid-December. So those bills will continue to be generated on a monthly basis. So you'll get sort of a one-time like snapshot every month with the current status of the account. So if there are any unpaid costs associated with your bill, then every month you're going to continue to get a bill until that account hits zero. Late fees will apply for if there are any, missed due dates for those bills. So obviously something to really keep a close eye on because any, late payments or unpaid charges could result not only in those late fees, but also in some different consequences that could impact move-in or future registration, transcript release, things like that. So we really want our students to be able to avoid any of those concerns and issues. So making sure that you have access to everything that you need and then are able to make those payments on time is really, really important. So if you are looking at a bill right now, it probably looks very similar to this one. This is our sample that I just want to point out a couple of important things here so that we're all saying the same thing. So on this bill that you can see on the screen, this is just a sample. So again, your specific numbers are going to look different, but this just gives you a sense of how all those charges look that I talked about a little bit earlier. So this, in this example, there is a lab fee, of course, that's on their schedule that's specific to this, fake student here. So they have that small lab fee charge. You also see the technology fee, the student support services fee, another lab fee, and then the registration fee. So those are all those different fees that I talked about that are showing up right at the top. Then the big one, that's showing you the fall tuition. And then you'll see the students living on campus. So they have a room charge, and then they also have their meal plan charge. In addition, you'll see that there are some payments or credits towards this account already, which may apply in some of your cases as well. So when you paid that tuition deposit to come to the university to say, like, I'm definitely going to be a Hawk, that $100 of that does go towards the tuition. So that will show up on the fall bill as a credit. Again, that won't show up on the spring bill because it does get fully released in the fall semester. So there is a little bit of a difference there. And then if your student's living on campus, again, another portion of that deposit that you paid does go towards their housing. So you'll see that credit on their account as well. Then we get to the pending transactions, which is what Catherine was speaking about earlier and talking about all the different financial aid that's applying to a student's record. So again, they're listed as pending because we are not able to actually release it as real money until 10 days before the start of the semester, but we still account for it here so you can see everything. A couple of things I want to draw your attention to, especially related to the subsidized and unsubsidized loan amounts. They're a little bit funky looking in terms of the actual amount that applies. So it is going to be just a tiny little bit less than half of what was awarded to the student. And that's because there is a bit of an origination fee that's taken off the top of that loan before it actually applies to the account. So when you see those numbers and you're like, I thought that was for $2,000 a year, why am I only seeing $990 for the fall semester? That's not exactly right. Well, that's because the origination fee has come off those loans. So that's just something to pay attention to. Okay, so then what does this all kind of break down to? Well, you can see way down at the bottom, it's going to show you that current balance. That's our first red box off to the left. That is the sum total of all of the charges. Then you're going to see amount now due, which is a little farther to the right, which takes into account any of those payments or credits and any of the pending transactions. So that amount now due is really the number to be paying attention to. It's what we talk about as the gap, right? So it's all of the different charges that are assessed for the student minus all of the financial aid that's already been applied. And it's what the family is then responsible for covering in order for the student to attend. And so in our next portion of the presentation, we're going to dig in a lot more to what are the different options to be able to cover that amount now due, which again, yours will look different than this one based on your individual like courses and whether they're living on campus or not, and then also your individual financial aid package. So before we get into how to cover that, I just wanted to circle back quickly to what I was talking about with that portal. So this is actually a screenshot from the Transact portal, which is where the student would go through their self-service to actually get access to the bill. So you can see there are just a couple of highlighted things over here that I wanted to draw your attention to. One is the statements, which is what that arrow is pointing to. So like I said, we're going to be generating a bill monthly to really to give you that snapshot in time. And so in order to see those prior statements, you can always click there and you can see the entire history. In addition, in the overview screen, that's going to be your like real-time information. So whereas the billing statements are a snapshot in time, where like as of this particular day, these were the specific transactions and what was owed on the account. This overview section will show you like if a student goes in and downgrades their meal plan tomorrow, well, a new bill isn't going to be generated, a new statement isn't going to be generated, but it will be reflected here in the overview that change has been made, and then the overall balance is going to go down if they've downgraded their meal plan, up if they've upgraded it. It might increase if they buy a parking permit or things like that. So that's something, again, for you and for the student to be paying attention to, because you can always see things in real time. When you go in and make a payment, you'll see that payment's been applied in real time. You won't have to wait for the next billing cycle. In addition, under the My account tab is where the student would go to actually set you up as an authorized payer. So it's very clearly listed, like right in the middle of that screen as they're scrolling down, where they can enter your information and your email address so that you can be set up in the portal as well. I'm not going to get into payment plans right now, but just like sneak peek that is a thing that also exists in the portal. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like later on.
Thank you, Katie. So as Katie mentioned, we will now spend the rest of the presentation sort of talking about different ways that you might be able to cover that amount now due. So just to sort of recap, we've taken you through the financial aid process. Now you have an understanding of the billing process and what to expect now that bills have released. And now we'd like to talk about different ways that families may finance their education. First and foremost, I want to mention that the Office of Student Financial Aid here at the University of Hartford is equipped and ready and willing to help you figure out the best options for your family. So everybody's financial circumstance is a bit different, and most families are going to use a combination of all of the different things that Katie and I are going to talk about for the remainder of the presentation. Things like payment plans, additional loan options, and utilizing additional scholarship funds to help cover costs. At this point, I'd like to talk through a couple of different loan options that many of our families utilize in order to help cover that amount now due. The first loan I'd like to talk about is the Federal Direct Plus Loan, or as we commonly refer to it as the Parent Plus Loan. So this loan is a loan for parents of undergraduate students to help cover educational expenses. The parent is the borrower of this loan. So the parent is the one who has the obligation for repayment on this particular loan program. It is a federal loan program, so it's administered through the U.S. Department of Education, and parents do need to submit an additional application in order to determine their eligibility for this loan. Parents can complete the application online at studentaid.gov. Families, if you have already completed the Federal Direct Plus Loan application, we've been working through getting those processed as soon as we possibly can. And, again, we get a lot of them this time of year, so we're working really hard to get those processed. So if you don't see it listed on your either financial aid award or see it as a pending transaction on the bill, that doesn't mean we haven't received it yet. It just may mean that we're still working through it, but we're working as quickly as we can to get those all completed. If you haven't done the Parent Plus loan application yet, but you think that's something that you would like to pursue, I want to give you a little bit of information about it. So this particular loan program is credit-based, and so it's going to be looking for what we call the absence of adverse credit. So what does that mean? It means no foreclosures, no bankruptcies, no accounts and collections more than 60 days past due, and no previously defaulted student loans. So if those things are missing from your credit history, regardless of your income or past debt that you may have, it is likely that you would be approved for this particular loan program. Any family that's approved for this particular loan or any parent that's approved for this particular loan would get that same fixed interest rate that you see listed on the screen. And as Katie mentioned, a lot of the federal loans have what we call an origination fee. So a fee is taken out of the Parent Plus loan before it's sent to the University of Hartford, 4.228%. So you would want to add some additional amount to the loan to make sure that you're covering that fee. And we're more than happy to help you calculate exactly what that amount is if you contact our office. If you're approved for the loan, much like the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans that I talked about earlier for students, parents do also have to complete a loan agreement or a master promissory note, and all of that is completed online at studentaid.gov. Now, if for some reason the parent does complete a Federal Direct Plus loan application and that application is not approved, they have a couple of different options. Number one, they can appeal that denial. So what does that mean? If for some reason there is, let's say, a transaction on your credit history that shows an account that is 60 days past due, but you know that it's back into good standing, you may be able to provide that documentation to the U.S. Department of Education and ask them to overturn the credit decision. And we do see that happen fairly regularly. Another option that you can pursue if the loan is denied is to use a creditworthy endorser or a co-signer on the loan. So that can be someone that's not a parent. It can be the other parent of the student, a grandparent, an aunt, uncle, anyone who's willing to co-sign on the loan for the parent. You can pursue that as an option. And then the third option is that the student does become eligible for some additional unsubsidized direct loan. So an additional $4,000 for the student's full first year. So $2,000 for the fall semester and $2,000 for the spring semester. So at least completing the Federal Direct Plus loan application is a good starting point to at least getting some additional loan funding to help cover the student's costs. If you have any difficulties with the application, we certainly ask you to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help walk you through it. But again, this application is done online through studentaid.gov. So that's option one. Another option that some families pursue is what we call a private or an alternative loan. These private and alternative loans are generally student loans, so loans that are in the student's name. However, these are not through the US Department of Education. So these are through private lenders. SoFi student loans, Chesla student loans, Wells Fargo student loans, just to name a couple that might be familiar to you all. So again, these are private lenders, so not through the US Department of Education. Students who apply for these private loans would do so directly through each individual lender. That being said, we do maintain a list of suggested lenders right on our website, and students are able to compare different lenders based on some certain criteria, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. The student would apply for the loan directly under their name. They would have to go through a credit history check. Of course, students who are just entering college are anywhere between 18 to 21 years old and are likely not going to be approved for the loan on their own. So they generally need someone that is creditworthy that can co-sign for them. It is very rare that a student is approved for one of these loans without a co-signer. And that co-signer can be anyone. It can be a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, anyone who is creditworthy that is willing to co-sign for the student to help cover their educational expenses. While we can't help you decide which lender to utilize, we do help you with thinking about, a few different criteria that you might want to consider when choosing a private loan lender. Some of those things that you want to think about is what is the interest rate range on the loan? So a lot of the federal loans that I've already talked about have fixed interest rates. You want to know if your private lender has a fixed or variable interest rate. Does it range, from 6% to 20%? Does it range from 6% to 10%? Those are going to vary by lender. What are the repayment options on that loan? So is the loan required to be repaid while the student is in school, or can it be deferred while the student is in school? Those are important factors to consider based on your family's financial circumstance. Does the loan have cosigner release? So this is a great option that many families consider, which is the student applies for the loan, is approved with a cosigner, graduates, gets that great job, begins paying back the loan for a year, 2 years, up to 4 years after graduation, makes many on-time consecutive payments, and then returns back to the lender to ask for the loan to be moved to solely in their name. So they reapply for the loan, and therefore the cosigner is removed from the loan. Some of these loans do have fees associated with them, similar to the origination fee on the federal loans. And so again, that's something that you should keep in mind. I did see a question come through in the Q&A that I'd like to address right now, which is, what is the timing on these loans? So families who are interested in applying for private or alternative loans, we generally get the application approval typically about 3 days after you receive notification. So we'll get notification directly, and then we process them as quickly as we can. Of course, we're getting lots of them this time of year. So there might be a little bit of a lag time, but we work really, really fast to try to get as many as we can processed in any given day. But just know that there could be, a week to 2 week lag time from the time that we receive the approval to the time you see it listed on your bill. That doesn't mean we don't have it. That doesn't mean it won't get processed. It just means that we do need a little bit of extra time. So those are two options that many families consider when considering, how to cover that amount now due. Lastly, I'd like to talk about applying for additional scholarships. So many different organizations have additional scholarships. So outside of the University of Hartford, civic organizations and nonprofit groups, sometimes a parent's employer might have some additional scholarships. Of course, we encourage all students to apply for these additional scholarships. I think it's unlikely that there are many scholarships that are still available for the fall of 2024, but I always mention it as part of this presentation because I want families to consider to continue thinking about it for years 2, 3, and 4. A lot of times students stop applying for these scholarships and don't continue applying for them for future years, but it's a great opportunity for students to continue to apply. We do have a number of outside scholarship search engines on our website that students can use to facilitate searching for those outside scholarships. And I always say to families, the best time to do that is after the fall semester is over. Students get about a 5-week break before the spring semester starts. That's the perfect time to start getting yourself organized, to start applying for these additional scholarships for future years. Sometimes it requires copies of transcripts or copies of the student's FAFSA form, sometimes additional essays. So make sure you're giving yourself lots of time for that. And if the student needs any help with the process, we certainly are happy to do that. One question we commonly get is if these additional scholarships affect the student's financial aid award. And generally speaking, no, especially many of the smaller scholarships. So, $500 or $1,000. But of course, some of the larger scholarships can impact a student's need level. And so that could be taken into consideration. But we do ask families that to notify our office if they receive an outside scholarship. We'll post it as part of their full financial aid award so that our billing department knows that they're expecting an outside scholarship. And then of course you'll send those funds either directly to the billing department from yourself, or that the organization might send the funds directly to the billing department also.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So all of that was the sort of financial aid side of how maybe some additional loan funds might be used to help cover that gap. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how different direct payment options that you might also want to make in order to cover that. But I do want to mention again that most of our families are using a combination of these different methods. So don't think of this as like you have to choose one. It's a check all that apply, right? So you may want to do some of this in a payment plan, some of this through that guest payer link where maybe you're going to have some other folks contributing, maybe some portion needs to be done in a loan. So, and some maybe gets covered by an outside scholarship. So again, there's no limit to how many of these different options you can engage with. But so we just present them to you. And then, if you have individual counseling needs, that's a great time to call the financial aid office to talk through, what you're thinking might make sense for your family. And they can go through those with you as well. So without any more introduction, I will again go back to that student self-service center, which is where you and the student then would be able to access the account to make direct payments. So we do accept those ACH payments, the electronic check where you would set up your bank account number and routing number. There's no charges, service charges, extra charges that are associated with that. So it's often the easiest, most convenient way to just go in and make a direct payment. We do accept debit and credit card payments, but there is an additional fee that's associated with those. That's assessed by the third party that kind of coordinates the billing, not by the university, but it is a 2.95% additional fee. So if you are looking for the convenience without the convenience fee, the ACH is really the way to go. But again, we do accept the debit and credit card payments as well. A couple of other popular options. You can always mail us a check. You would mail that directly to the university with the attention to the Center for Student Success, and they can process that payment. A good idea to include information about who the payment is for. So the student's ID number in the memo line of the check, or you can enclose additional information about what account to apply that to so that they're able to actually apply those when they come in. You can pay in person at the Center for Student Success, but not by credit card. So credit card payments are only available through the online portal, but you can bring a check or cash to the Center for Student Success if you did need to make a payment that way. We do have a process for taking international or wire payments. That's something where we would want you to call the Center for Student Success so that we could walk you through it. It's very kind of specific in terms of how that has to be done. So they like to be able to walk people through that one-on-one. And then a 529 plan. So if you have, been saving up through a state plan towards your student's college education, maybe for the past couple of years, and have some money there in those accounts that you want to access, now is a good time to start investigating whether, how to actually get access to those funds. So a lot of times you're able to do that directly through that portal, that Transact portal, where we actually have the ability for you to select your state's plan and kind of enter your login information for that account and be able to access the funds directly. So that's very convenient when we are able to do that. But then sometimes there are still some states that don't participate with that. And so you're not able to select them from the drop-down list. That doesn't mean that we won't accept those funds. It just means it can't be done directly through the portal, which is totally fine. We just do it the old-fashioned way, where you would actually just get a check cut from the 529 plan directly. And you could have that sent over to the university, and we would then post it to the student's account. So easy to do either way, but we are working towards trying to get as many states as possible added to that portal. And more are added every year so that it just is a little bit easier to manage. And then I'm going to spend a little more time talking about this CashNet full service payment plan option. So what this is the ability to essentially defer some of the payments over and spread them out over several months. So it'd be 5 months in the fall, and then you would do another 5 months in the spring. So setting up a 5 payment plan is, again, just for that fall semester, just for that bill that just went out. So it only costs $40 to enroll, and you pay that once per term when you set up the plan for that particular semester. But there are no additional fees, late fees, anything like that. That accrue as if you're doing a payment plan. So there is still plenty of time to set up a 5-pay option, but then we also have a 4-payment option and a 3-payment option if you do miss that first 5-payment deadline. Obviously, the more payments you split it up into, the less each payment is. So I always like to get people in on that 5-payment option, which can be set up all the way through July 31st. So with the bill not being due for the fall until July 30th, you've got still plenty of time to review what you received today and see, how much you're able to do in that payment plan. So this doesn't mean that, if you're interested in the payment plan, it doesn't mean that you have to do this again for the full amount. So this is where those different combinations of methods of payment really come into play. If you're thinking you're going to have to, do a loan, either a Parent Plus loan or do a private loan to cover a bulk of the cost, but you do have some ability to pay a little bit monthly, or maybe you have some in a 529, but it's not going to cover the full amount, and you're going to do a little bit in a monthly payment, you can actually tell CashNet how much you want to do as a payment plan, and it will split it up for you over 5 months. So if you're able to do, let's say the total cost on the bill is $10,000, but you're only really able to do $500 a month, well, that's still going to make a decent dent in that $10,000, and it just reduces the amount that you'd be borrowing in a loan, or that you'd be using some other method to pay for. So I always think it's a good idea, if you're able to do a little bit each month, to set up that payment plan for just the amount that you can do, because again, that's just going to reduce the amount that you may need to borrow, or the amount that you're pulling from that 529 early on. So if you're set up as an authorized payer, you can go in and set up that payment plan at any time. It's open right now. You can do it for the full amount, or you can do it for a smaller portion of what's due, and then plan to use other means for the rest of the payments. A little bit of an awkward gap there then. So there is a small window of time where the 4-payment option would be available. So I do want to just draw your attention to this. Generally, those payments are going to be due on the 5th of every month, regardless of when you set up that first one. So it's already July 8th, right? So if you set up that 5-payment plan, let's say today, you're going to make your first payment today, and then your next payment is due August 5th, September 5th, October 5th, et cetera, until you've made all 5 of those payments. So that said, if you wait all the way until July 30th to set up that 5-payment option, you'll make a payment July 30th, and then you'll turn around and make another payment August 5th. So I do recommend, again, doing that as early as possible if you're looking to split up those payments kind of more evenly or make them more spread out. We do just try to keep that first option open for as long as possible to let as many people as possible enroll in that 5-payment option. But we do want, to help you out by making sure that that all the rest of the payments will then still be due on the 5th. So getting that set up earlier is going to space them out even more.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about financial aid renewal. I mentioned it earlier in the presentation, but just want to go over a couple of kind of reminders. First and foremost, just making sure that students are completing any missing requirements for their financial aid. So making sure that entrance counseling, the master promissory note, tax documentation is all submitted. Also, in order to renew financial aid every year, just a reminder, students do need to complete that FAFSA form for their need-based financial aid by April 1st. And then lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit more about academic progress. As I mentioned earlier, some scholarships require at least meeting a minimum GPA standards. And that's what we call satisfactory academic progress. And satisfactory academic progress is twofold. First, it's a measure of a cumulative GPA for each academic year. It is about a 2.0 GPA, but it is going to vary by school or college and the program that the student is in. But that is the absolute minimum GPA standard in order to remain enrolled in a student's program and continue financial aid. Again, some scholarships have a higher GPA threshold. So for example, our Regents Scholarship or our President's Scholarship both have a 3.0 cumulative GPA requirement in addition to meeting minimum academic standards. The other piece to academic progress is a measure of a successful completion of credits from academic year to academic year. So all students who are receiving full-time financial aid need to complete successfully between 24 and 28 credits per academic year. And this is going to vary by school or college and the student's degree program, but generally speaking, they need to meet between 24 and 28 credits. Again, those are the minimum standards. In most cases, students are generally going to be taking between 12 and 15 credits, so likely they will receive, or earn a higher amount of credits from academic year to academic year. If the student is unsure about their scholarship amount, they're unsure about what the requirements are, again, they can log into their self-service account, and under their financial aid award, they can click on the award and it will tell them what is required in order to renew that particular award from year to year.
So one other note to make, since we've spent a little bit of time tonight talking about the Parent Plus loan, which is a popular option, is refunds. So you're probably thinking, well, why are we talking about refunds? And really that's because the overall cost of attendance is what that Parent Plus loan can be taken out to cover. And so that includes both direct costs in so what the university is actually putting on the bill, but then also includes indirect costs like travel expenses, books, et cetera, that would not show up on the bill. And so if you're thinking of doing the Parent Plus loan and thinking of taking that out for like the entire cost of attendance, well, that is going to go above and beyond what the university is actually going to charge on the bill, but is still useful funds to be able to pay for, again, those books, travel expenses, materials, et cetera, that wouldn't be assessed by the university. So what happens is that the actual loan would then come into the university in that full amount, and it would pay more than what's being charged on the bill, and then would generate a credit for the rest of the amount. And then we have a process through the Center for Student Success where students actually just come to us and request that refund to be given to them so that they can take that money and then go buy the books or buy the plane ticket that they need to get home, et cetera. And so we use a third-party vendor for that, which is called Bank Mobile, and students will become familiar with that process if they do need to request a refund. But students just actually get notified if there's a refund available on their account, meaning that there's a credit that's been generated because more money has been paid than was actually billed. And they'll get an email to set up their refund preference, which just gives them the ability to decide how they're going to receive that money, whether it's going to go direct deposit, et cetera. And then they can actually receive those funds and then take them to spend on the other education related expenses that I've already talked about. And then finally, we've been talking about so many big numbers today, and we know that this is a huge investment that you're making, that your student is making in their education and their future. And we think it's important that you just understand how to protect that investment. It is optional to do tuition protection, really, we call it tuition insurance, but it is something that I think it's important for every family to consider. There is a window of time at the very beginning of the semester where some amount of money may be available to be returned to a family if a student needs to withdraw, but that window is very narrow. And we know that anything can happen throughout the course of a semester or a year that might require the student to leave school before they finish the semester. And in cases where the university is no longer issuing any refunds or credits onto a student's account, tuition insurance would then take over. And so again, this is just one of those things. It's every family's, decision to make for themselves, but we just recognizing that this is a big investment and that it makes sense to protect that. We want to make you aware of this plan option so that you can do a little more investigating and see whether this might be right for you. And I know we've had some questions coming in throughout, but now we'll open it up for additional questions if you still have them. We've got, we can do some live and we can do some